The response that has now come in from Dr. S. Jaishankar, considering there was so much that was spoken about on why the EAM is not responding. There was a statement that was released by the Ministry of External Affairs at the outset through the spokesperson, Mr. Bagchi, but nothing, no pointed response coming in from Dr. S. Jaishankar. Now that he finally has, do you think it's apt? Do you think it's delayed? Or do you think he's been forced to respond?
No, I don't think it is delayed. I don't think he's been forced to respond. I think Dr. Jaishankar has responded at the time when he needed to respond. Because I think what needed to be said on the 19th when Mr. Justin Trudeau made these baseless allegations, he calls them credible allegations, but of course he has not furnished any evidence, any proof to substantiate these allegations, and they were responded to by our official spokesperson saying that they are absurd and motivated. I think that was quite adequate to define these particular allegations. So he did, in his own statement to the UNGA, he did say that political convenience should not determine the response of countries to terrorism or to extremism violence. I think this was definitely a response to, an appropriate response to Canada. And then he got an opportunity, he got a platform at the Council on Foreign Relations, and he made it out very clear that this is not Government of India's policy. Government of India doesn't do this extraterritorial killings. And number two, that we have till date not received any relevant or significant information on this. So you know what you mentioned, Griha, right at the beginning, that the Americans might be upset that we have not taken any action. But if we have not received any relevant information, there is no basis on which we can be expected to take action. So to respond to your question, I think Mr. Dr. Jaishankar's response was very appropriate, very
But Mr.
measured.
Sajjanhar, no, I mean, I'd like to actually
I
weigh in here. I did not say that America is kind of upset that there is no response coming in from India. My point is that is America taken aback with the kind of response that India has given? They were not really ready for the offensive that External Affairs Minister or the Ministry of External Affairs has been known to in fact have in situations like this. Of course, this is an unprecedented situation, but do you think America was not really ready for it? And that's why that public outing has come through a series of statements, whether it is Mr. David Cohen, whether it is Mr. Blinken, or for that matter, Mr. Sullivan. And remember, Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Blinken have been India-friendly figures that we talk about.
Yeah, I would imagine that they still continue to be India-friendly figures. I would still imagine that they are, the India relationship is a very significant relationship. I think even at the level of the president, it has been mentioned that it is and even Jake Sullivan has mentioned that this is the most significant partnership for the United States. So I don't think that they are, inimical or they have changed their position on as far as that is concerned. So I think we have to look at for reasons as to why these statements have come. But again, to respond to your question directly, I think definitely the Canadians would have been taken by surprise. Maybe they did not expect such a muscular response, such a robust response. But I think Canada and America, as well as the whole world, should recognize that this is a new India. This is not the India of the past. This India will fight for its rights. And when we find that, even without Griha, and I think you must appreciate this, even without the investigation having been completed, the political leader weighs in and, makes these charges against India. There has not been a charge sheet that has been filed. These are matters, which are really done by the police. They are, investigation of a crime is not undertaken by the political leaders. They have to wait for the investigative agencies to come up with some results. Obviously, the investigative agencies have not come up with any result. They don't know who killed him. No arrest has been made. No FIR has been issued. And the Prime Minister stands up and says that we have credible allegations. It doesn't square up. And India has to call that out. And India did what it needed to do. If it has surprised some of our friends and partners, so be it. But I think they have to realize that you can't sort of, there cannot be, as the External Affairs Minister said, there cannot be different rules for one for yourself.
Yes.
That, if it is a terrorist, I can go around kill him.
Yeah.
If it is your terrorist, then, he'll be labeled as a freedom fighter. So I think this is hypocrisy, which the External Affairs Minister had no qualms in calling it out.
Mr. Sareen, on this very point that Mr. S. Jaishankar spoke about, when it is about these extraterritorial killings, or for that matter, the sovereign integrity of one's land, it cannot be a cherry-picking environment for the same. Rules cannot be different for two different aspects. When we talk about that, and we take, for example, the killings that have happened in the past on Canadian soil, whether it is about Karima Baloch, whether it is about the Chinese national Weihu, we have immense number of examples of how these people were exiled in Canada. They were finding that sort of safe spot in Canada, and yet they were also allegedly murdered in Canada, possibly by Pakistan and China respectively. At that time, there was no outraging that had come in from the Canadian Prime Minister. Why now that selective approach of Trudeau is being questioned? How do you read that in context of Mr. Jaishankar's statement as well?
Look, in fact, in the case of the other dissidents who have been killed, not only was there no outrage from Mr. Trudeau or anybody else in the Canadian system, there was an active cover-up in whatever happened. And they came out, giving a clean chit without having gone into any kind of investigation, despite the fact that there were serious apprehensions to their life. But on the whole, on what Dr. Jaishankar said, I think, he was responding to, and in a sense, without naming Canada, he was making India's position very clear on the kind of sneering hypocrisy which we see from some of these Western countries. You were talking about this statement of transnational repression. Frankly speaking, I don't think that applies to us. Where have we done transnational repression? In fact, the people who have done transnational repression perhaps are the people who have coined this term transnational repression. Number one. Number two, there are other countries which have been notorious for transnational repression, if at all, that it can be called that. So I don't see, all that stuff which has been said either by the Canadian representative during his talk at the UNGA or by the Americans and the various statements that we're making. They don't apply to us. So I don't see why, we need to be defensive or we need to, be responding to those statements.
No, but Mr. Sareen, it's one thing to say that it doesn't apply to us. The other thing is that there's a lot of nitpicking on statements that are happening when it is about diplomacy. Now, the statement by External Affairs Minister can also be read in that context, that he is possibly brazening it out. If India has done it, so be it. It can be read as that posturing as well, because Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India is right now known for that kind of muscular politics, and it has been acknowledged also. Whether that acknowledgement internationally is coming or not is the big question, because domestically it is working. But don't you think that it can be read in two different ways if the External Affairs Minister says that why cherry pick on this aspect?
No, look, he is saying that, look, if you are talking about a rules-based order, then the rules have to apply equally to everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
So, no, you can't say that I have made the rules, but I can break them whenever I want to break them, right? Those same rules don't apply to me, because clearly they don't apply to these guys. The Americans go about like a bull in a china shop around the world and do whatever they have to do. Now, if you point that out, people say that, look, why are you saying this? Why should we not say it? So what we are saying is that, look, we made our position very clear. If you have any evidence, bring it out. Now, just yesterday, I believe, this guy, his sidekick, Trudeau's sidekick, that Khalistani terrorist, Jagmeet Singh, he has come out with an interview. Even in that, he said the headlines, again, you see, look at the way the Western media manages the headline. The headline says something, but when you read the story, the guy very clearly says that, no, there was really nothing very specific, nothing which, you could say was a clinching evidence. So they literally have nothing. What they are now doing is they are saying that, look, I am accusing you. You please put a noose around your neck and hang yourself, even though there is no evidence against you. Then we have no proof against you. If you have the proof, please bring it out. You claim to have such great intelligence services and everything, and you have now said that there were 6 people involved. Now, clearly, those were not diplomats like Mr. Sajjanhar who were going and getaway cars and bumping off people. Indian diplomats don't do that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So obviously there were some people, probably locals. Let us assume they were hired. If they were hired, they were locals. Why haven't you arrested anybody? Why haven't you detained anybody? You haven't questioned anybody. But you have come out openly with your bat swinging and guns firing at India. And you expect us to take his lying down?
Okay.
I'm sorry, it doesn't happen. And if they say that we've exchanged information with us, with India, and India says that, look, yeah, you've spoken about it, but you've not given us any evidence. You've just said that there are these apprehensions or something to that effect. How is that? How does that implicate us?
Right.
But then there is the 1 second, Griya. There's then the issue of the principle of carrying out these kind of attacks. Now, should that principle not apply equally to everyone? I am no defender. By God, I tell you, I swear on my children, I was one of the happiest people when Osama bin Laden was taken out. I think that was the right thing to do. But Osama bin Laden was taken out not in a quote-unquote rogue state, as some editors of The Economist call it. Right? Osama bin Laden was taken out in a country which probably even now is titled a major non-NATO ally. You never bothered to inform them. You carried out a covert raid. You bumped off people, 6, 7, 8, 10 people. You took a body away, and that was all kosher, right? And you've done it in various other places. So the point is that if that principle applies, then that principle has to apply equally to everybody,
Absolutely.
including to these people.
Absolutely.
So
Mr. Thoning, let me bring you in here.